All right, God be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Gracious and loving one, we give you thanks for the generosity of this community, for the trust that we share, for the ways that we put our resources into action through ministry. Be with us as we talk about the finances of this church. Be with the vestry as they make decisions about the budget. Help us to make sound decisions and always seeking to follow where you would lead us. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Well, welcome everyone. This is sort of a question and answer session about both the budget and the finances of the church where we find ourselves. I had said in the eNoticias email this week, here's the very, very broad picture. The news is good. This year we did finish with a deficit, but it was a deficit of less than 1% of our budget. And according to Sherry Bertram, our business administrator, who's here and made me promise that she could sit in the back and just be available for questions if we had
But she
detailed
should stand up so people know who
everybody
she
should stand up
is.
and applaud Sherry. But according to Sherry, the difference, that small deficit, is really kind of a clerical thing about where one charge landed versus another. When the Finance Committee looked at the end of the year report on Tuesday, we were $4,000 in the black, but then we discovered that we have not yet paid for the audit for 2023 because that's being finished. So we decided to take the money from the audit from the 24 budget and put it in the 25 budget, which is where we ended up with that slight deficit. But that is all to say, we finished basically even, which is in terms of income and expenditure, which in a year with this much transition is a really good place to finish. And then the other piece of what we want to talk about today is the budget. And so you've got two handouts in front of you, and we're going to rely on paper rather than on the screen today. But in front of you, you have the 2024 year-end financials, how much we spent on what categories, and what our budget had been. And then we also have a set of graphs that I'll ask us to talk through. But you can see at the very bottom of the operating fund, where we end up is with that small, that's the AEDS. So we're on your second piece of paper at the bottom, is where you see that we end the year in the second column, that's year-to-date total. We ended the year in the negative by $7,639. Again, less than 1% difference between income and revenue. So, treasurer and assistant treasurer, where would you like to start?
Things has been very interesting. One of the things I wanted to point out is, as you all probably know, each church pays a fair share to the diocese based on its income. Our fair share this year, off the top of my head, was like $125,000.
Yeah, $134,000.
$134,000. We had more money come in December, so significantly more. So it's bad. And as I understand it, we are the second highest fair share in the diocese.
Yes. Yeah, it changes a little bit year to year, but typically we're in the top 3.
Right.
So I don't know where we will finish this year.
Right. The other is that does not include the designated contributions to things like the food pantry, Las Familias, immigration ministries, and so forth. Those are dedicated accounts, not part of the budget. So if you look at the budget, it can look like we don't do much for outreach, but we really do. It just is not part of the budget. One of the reasons is, if it were part of the budget, the fair share would go to the diocese. When JP was the business administrator, it was agreed that would be set aside separate, and we didn't have to pay a fair share. So now that he's at the diocese, he can't complain. So anyway, just those kinds of things were, and this year, last year, Sherry set the food pantry Casa San Miguel separate from the regular financial reports so that it was really clear that money was designated. Yeah.
Right, so just so that I understand, you're saying that all dedicated funds are not part of what you're showing?
I know they're in there, but they're not part of the operating budget.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah, so you'll see that on the front page, you will see Casa San Miguel and so forth. And now Sherry brought to the Finance Committee, and we agreed that Las Familias is also going to have its own specific dedicated account. Again, outside the budget, but dedicated, so money in and out is going to be really clear, able to see that and know where all of that is. Is there going to be another dedicated account for immigration? But no,
No.
not at this point. Okay, so we try to do those big amounts that come in and out a lot that way. Okay, any questions on that? Lee?
Just an observation, with the food bank and the Las Familias,
Yeah.
the money that is spent, the equivalent money on the other side is huge. The money spent for the food bank, you give away 4 or 5 times that much if those people had to buy that food at the grocery store.
Right, absolutely.
So the net result with the volunteer hours and everything else is really impressive.
Yes,
by the time
it's a
you get
huge
through.
ministry,
Yes,
yes,
it's huge.
absolutely, absolutely. And I heard from Jake that we get a lot of our food from Roadrunner for pennies on a dollar kind of thing. They had no produce this week. So we've got frozen meat for some reason, wonderful, but no, very little produce. We do, not me, but various people at the food pantry, like Robert, do pickups. Does everybody know that Robert and Jake are the 2 people in charge of the food pantry?
Yeah.
So you know that. So I guess they go to 12 different places, Jake said, to pick up donations, and that's where we hope we'll be getting a lot of produce. We get our bread and our bakery stuff and all of our goodies that people really want, the cookies and stuff, from our supermarket pickups. Smith's is really good, Sprouts, so there's a variety of those, Trader Joe's. So anyway, so that's the sort of a basic thing in the budget that one may not see those offhand. You had something to say.
Oh, hi, I'm Jim Moffett. I'm the assistant treasurer.
With a history.
I was a treasurer from 2007 till 2016, I think it was. And so this is kind of familiar turf. Of course, the problem was there really wasn't any fresh vegetables at Sprouts or Smith's this week either. There was just, it's January, there are not a lot of fresh vegetables. This year was very much a year of transition. We have so many personnel changes that really made both budgeting and just trying to measure where we were confusing as personnel came or were added. And it took a lot longer, and it was much harder to get going on the new financial system that we had hoped for. There were 8 different attempts to upload the data from the old years that failed, and finally we just said, let's just go forward starting January 1, 2024, and if we need history, we have the old system to see what we did in the past. But that was a huge effort on Sherry's part, and great thanks is due to her for getting us over to transition to a new and clearer system with less manual adjustments and relying much more on automated reporting from out of the system, which is much more trustworthy. We also had a long delay in getting a new auditor, which is finally here and underway. It actually going to be wrapped up in another couple of weeks. They're doing a fine job of getting us our long delayed 2023 audit, and it won't be much longer into 2025 before they start on the 2024 audit. So we'll catch that up for the diocese. Likes to see audited financials every year, which is odd because I've talked to other churches and many of them want audited financials only every 3 years and just a auditor's review in the interim years. But this year, the policy of the Diocese of Rio Grande is to have an audited financial statement from a church our size for every year. So we will catch that up and provide an audited result to the diocese. And it was a bit of a challenge getting JP off of and Father Britton off of the signatory authorities for a lot of our accounts and getting that all over to people who are actually here. But we were able to do that.
So now we're getting all of the money in place as to where we want it to be.
To maximize our interest, which
Right.
is like, we have a large account at Schwab that holds both the dedicated funds money and other cash of the church, a couple 100,000 other cash of the church. So we're doing our best to maximize the earnings of that, consistent with the most absolute possible security of the principal. So it's mostly in treasury bills. If the treasury bills become a problem, then it's not just our church that's going to have a big problem. But it's all of us going to have problems. Your money isn't going to be worth anything. But I think that's going to get taken care of. And I still assume the treasury bills will still be the safest investment possible, and they are completely liquid. And we've structured a ladder of about 50,000 maturing every month of those as we go forward. So in maximizing our interest income in our available cash, and that gives us about $30,000 a year, which is a very nice addition. Rather than paying interest, we have no debt, so we don't have to pay any interest.
And we do also have the endowment fund, and the endowment fund is set up to support our ministries and also capital expenses. And that is at DFMS, Domestic and Foreign Mission Society.
Missionary Society.
Missionary
Yeah.
Society, which is the official Episcopal Church name.
Yep.
And their official money keeping. And so we have got at the moment, unless it got changed very recently, 2 accounts there. One that is the endowment account, which at the last report we had was worth just under $600,000. And the endowment committee each year looks at that at the 12-month rolling average and decides how much can go into being requested by the missions and also for capital expenses. This year, it's $24,000.
4%.
Cap on that,
So
right?
4%.
4%.
Yeah, there's a cap that how much can be taken out.
5%, yeah. 5%, yeah, was what. But all of this is designated by the vestry. It's not designated by a person, in their will. And so the vestry can change their mind.
Well, so our endowment is actually designated by the annual meeting of the
Of the
parish.
parish, right.
And so the vestry on their own can't change the terms of the endowment. It's in the bylaws.
Right.
And so as such, to change the endowment, we would need the whole congregation to vote as part of an annual meeting.
Right, to make a change, should we wish to, not that I'm thinking we wish to.
There's no change. The major change to the endowment this year was that Tom Andrews' estate came through with a gift of over $100,000, one of the largest gifts in the history of St. Michael's, and so the value of the endowment increased significantly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you,
Yes. We also have one other fund that's at DFMS that it has about $46,000 in it. And if I remember correctly, that came about because at one point we had a lot of money in our checking account and the vestry asked JP to do some investment with it. And so it got sent to DFMS where it's part of their whole and it's invested with the whole. We are in the process of moving that over to Schwab, and so that we'll only have the endowment at DFMS now.
So I put up on the screen when I realized that somehow the labels didn't print on our magic pie charts. And so I don't know how, I don't know why there are no labels, but I thought I'd walk you through what the labels should be. So when we're gonna work from the back to the front, because that's the holy direction, right? So you're looking for the one that says budget expenses of 2024. So this is how we finished the year. So our largest single expenditure, the big purple slice, is clergy and staff salaries. We talked about at the forum in October. We could try to break that down by like monetizing each hour that people spend on different tasks and tell you like pastoral care is 30% of our budget. But I think it's actually more transparent to say, this is how much we spend paying people. And I think it is really helpful to think in a church, salary is mission, right? We pay folks who do ministry. And so it's not really easy to say, well, this much is admin and this much is salary is often mission. So clergy and staff salaries, those came in a little under budget, as would be expected. The most expensive people to employ are clergy, and we had 2 clergy who were here a shorter amount of time than we were planning at the beginning of January of 24. Benefits and taxes were a little bit under. Now, what's interesting about that is with all of the changeovers, we had some overlap months and things. So the fact that we finished under is a good sign. Formation for a few years now has been finishing under budget. My hope is that with a new priest focused on formation, we'll be spending more of that money. Music and worship, also, we spent a little bit less than what we had budgeted. And that may have had to do a little bit with, there was a little bit of a gap between Paulita and Steve. Fellowship was more expensive than what we budgeted. That was largely because we threw 2 big parties for the departures of Mandy and JP. Our diocesan pledge was more than we anticipated. That is a fixed number based on how much money comes in. So more money comes in than we budget for, we have to give the diocese more of it. Our upkeep and insurance was more than budgeted. A piece of that was that while we were in a gap between 2 sextons, we had a number of things that we had to pay contractors to come in to do. And so that's a big piece. And then admin was a little bit ahead as well. If we go to our next page, if I can do that.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yep.
So the admin is the expenses of running the office as opposed to the salaries of the...
Yeah, that's the expenses of running the office. So if you open up the detail sheets, you've got a section labeled church administration. Part of what happens and the differences there is that JP and Sherry count things a little bit differently, right? So maybe part of the copier lease is, copier printing costs were up, but office equipment maintenance was down. It's possible that every time we called the copy people to come fix the copier, that got charged to copier as opposed to equipment maintenance. So we're going through a little bit of that kind of change right now. But writ large, church administration, and then you've also got your, that's 63. Where's my 63? There's another number in that 63. The categories have to be moved around a little bit to play with them. So I have to figure out exactly where that 57 versus 63 is. There's another category, maybe stewardship and finance. Yeah, it's the stewardship and finance line. You add that in and you get your numbers. So there was no cost for a rector search or a vestry retreat this year. But some of our numbers, particularly in software and computers, were up. We switched over several major systems this year and had to replace a number of computer pieces. And so a lot of that ended up there. That's our largest item that's $10,000 over.
And one thing I do want to point out, on my page 3 anyway, at the top of the page, you've got business administrator, communications director, parish administrator. This is line 10, 5110.
So they don't have, we have rolled up on the report for everyone, all of the salaries, yeah.
Okay, okay.
So as finance
what I
committee,
had-
you see everyone's salaries,
Right,
but
absolutely. They
yeah.
don't have that.
Yeah.
Okay. But we are, we no longer have a parish administrator. We have a church what are we calling him?
We have an office administrator and a business administrator.
Okay, so, so in the big form for the vestry you'll be seeing, there's 2 line items, one of which is 0 because we've changed things around.
Yep. We've reconfigured the staff a little bit. All right, so moving to the next page. So budgets and expenses for 2024. You see the detail on 2024 on what's been in what category. This is mostly a prelude to show you budget expenses for 2025. There we go. Oh, here's the revenue for 2025. So on the revenue side of the budget, the biggest light blue is pledge income. That has always been true. It is the generosity of our members. The second item, which is in green, is givers of record. That's folks who we know who they are and they are giving, but we don't have a pledge for them. Loose plate, we beat our number for in 2024, and so we're keeping it at 17,000. So you can see as you start adding those up, Pac-Man, you know, the vast majority of what we have to work with at St. Michael's is the generosity of our congregation. We have a small amount of other income and facility use fees. That's concerts and AA groups and 12-step groups. We have the interest and dividend income. You'll see we had quite a bit more than we are even budgeting for in 2025. And then we have, because Simone is also being hired by the bishop's office to help with the bishop's school, we are anticipating a memorandum of understanding from the diocese, which will contribute to the associate rector's salary at about $42,000. And so Simone will essentially be between 3/4 and 2/3 time with us, and then between 1/3 and a quarter and a third time with the diocese for the work at the bishop's school. I really wanted to show down here, and I'm going to zoom in on it and bring it. Am I zooming in okay? Well, now I'm freezing. There it goes. We've been talking for a number of years about the deficit. I wanted to show you the deficit versus actuals. So in 2022, we budgeted a deficit of $73,000, and we finished the year in the black by $200,000. A lot of that was the PPP loan that turned into a grant, but it was a significant amount of money that came in that year.
Do people know what the PPP is?
The PPP, that was in COVID, the federal government offered Paycheck Protection Program. And so that was a large income to the church that was unbudgeted. In 2023, last year, we budgeted $176,000 deficit, and we finished in the black by $9,000. In 2024, we budgeted $182,000 deficit, and we finished in the red by less than 1%. So this year, Jim and Sherry and I put our heads together and started looking at places in the budget where we had been budgeting and not expending a great deal. A big part of that was how we were budgeting for insurance for staff members, healthcare primarily, who were not taking the offer of insurance. Your vestry incentivized folks to really think about how they interact with church's insurance this year. Rather than just saying, okay, thanks, we'll take all that money that we're not spending on health insurance, we said, if you don't take the full offer of health insurance, you'll get a small stipend back. And so rather than, there are a lot of companies out there that will use a stick versus a carrot in this. So in a lot of companies, if your spouse has access to a plan and they jump on your plan, the company will penalize you in your salary for that. We're taking an incentive approach as opposed to a stick approach. We're saying we offer everyone who's eligible for health insurance employee +1. If you don't take the +1, in my case, last year, Ellis and Silas, one of them could have been on my insurance, probably Silas, but we had Silas on Ellis's insurance instead, and so a piece of my salary came from this. This year, Ellis and I looked at it and we realized that Albuquerque Public Schools offers way better insurance than the Episcopal Church can. And so I am taking Albuquerque Public Schools insurance, and we get a small stipend that helps offset what we have to contribute to APS for my insurance. But our stipend is just a little bit more than what we're contributing, so it works out in my favor. But for the church, it saves the church about $20,000. Yeah. So by doing this, it increased the compensation for some of our staff who were not taking insurance offers already, but it also incentivized our staff as we had all this changeover to really look at health insurance, and it's saving us a great deal of money. It's a big piece of that $100,000 we were able to cut out. We were also, because of that memorandum of understanding with the diocese, that's $42,000 in, that wasn't in the 24 budget. And so that's a big piece of it, but we've knocked our deficit down, our budgeted deficit that we've never realized down. So we could finish the year in a really strong place. Questions about the deficit? There have been times when this meeting, it's felt like has a tone of the sky is falling, and I'm here to tell you the sky is not fallen. We're in good stead. In fact, we're in a place where if the vestry had the appetite and the right opportunity existed, I would feel confident saying to the vestry, we have another priest who has come and interviewed with me and a team, and I think they're a really good match. I think we should spend some of our cash on hiring this person and trust that the growth in the congregation and its giving will catch up with us over the long term. We're in that strong of a place. Les?
So, Mike, is it safe for all of us to assume that the clergy, the vestry, and everybody is taking into account the facts that attendance to churches worldwide is down, contributions worldwide is down, and who knows what's going to happen to the economy under a new administration this year? All of that's being taken into account. And I'm not saying the sky is falling. I just believe that, there's some challenges that I hope that, you have in your heart and everybody understands.
So I want to take a moment under the About button on our website here. If you go to the annual meeting site, this is where you've got your bios for vestry candidates and diocesan delegates and written reports. The only written report up there now, but it will stay up there, is the parish register report. So I'm going to open that up real quick. And I want to show you this graph. You're right. Across the church, attendance numbers are down and giving is down. But this is St. Michael's since 2019. So in 2019, we had 288 people in person in worship. That's an average Sunday attendance. Now, I have some disputes about average Sunday attendance as a measure of membership, because in my ministry, I've been a priest. I have been ordained, 14 years this year. So in the time I've been ordained, I've watched more and more people come to church with less frequency. So there are a lot more people that are faithful, giving and ongoing members of a church that worship once a month to once every 6 weeks. And that pattern is also tracking. So that's my one dispute with average Sunday attendance. Still, in 2019, we were at 288. In 2020, that number dropped significantly in-person. But online, which we didn't have online in 2019, it gets us to 318 people are worshiping with us. And then you see the in-person tick up, and the online got a little bit smaller, but starting in 22, it held pretty steady. And this year, if you factor in online, we're at 386 people.
This year,
2024, last year, 2024, we're at 386 people, average Sunday attendance. The last time St. Michael's saw 386 people in average Sunday attendance was before 2012. Yeah. If you look at totals, we're down a little bit of total in person still, by about 2,000. Our ASA is down by 44. But if you look at Easter and Christmas, Easter, of course, didn't happen in person in 2020. But in 2021, these are just in-person numbers down here. Easter was 229, 23, 383, 486 in 23, 522 in 24. I honestly think Easter and Christmas numbers, that's where the Church of England puts a lot of their faith in terms of how you count people in worship, and I think they may be a better indicator. Christmas was 526 in 2019. We dropped to nothing, 261, 370, 400 last year. Christmas this year, we had more people than we did at Christmas in 2019. So St. Michael's is defying trends that we're seeing across the church. We've seen year over year consistent increases to pledging, both in terms of numbers of pledges and in terms of dollars pledged. So I think we're in a stronger place than a lot of the church. And that's partly what we're seeing is some congregations are holding steady or growing, and that's actually offsetting what's happening in a lot of smaller churches where they're shrinking both in terms of numbers and in budget. Yep.
I also want to emphasize that our budget deficit is based, it means that our expected current income doesn't meet our expected current expenses.
Yeah.
And first of all, we, the vestry, are expecting our income to be even higher, but we've always been a little conservative on our income.
Yeah,
as you,
always.
both treasurer and assistant treasurer are nodding your heads, yes. Even though we might have $700,000 in pledges right in our hands right now, we don't put on in our number and say, oh, we're going to get 800,000. But pledges do come in during the year, and so do visitors. So for loose plate, so we continue to have increases in income throughout the year.
Yeah.
We just don't know exactly what they're going to be.
Yeah, I'll say this is still a very conservative budget in a lot of ways. We continue to outperform pledging, and that's been true for St. Michael's, which is never, every church I've worked at before this one, you get your pledges and then you discount them. You take like a 5% cut off the top of pledging to put the pledging in the budget, anticipating that not everyone will always be able to fulfill their pledge. This is the only church I've worked in where you all consistently give more than you've pledged, which is a wonderful gift, right? And we don't budget for it. So this year we had $710,000 in pledge revenue and we budgeted $700,000. And this was a year where there was a lot of transition as well in terms of folks who have pledged. And there were some folks that retired, some folks who died, some folks that moved to other congregations that had made up a big part of our pledging in years past. And the congregation still outperformed $700,000. And so we've kept that where it is. We also tend to be conservative, even with what we've done with health insurance. We've put more in the budget than we necessarily anticipate spending. Because we have a new hire and we've got potentially another hire to come, we want to be padded to do that.
May I share a personal opinion?
Yes, Jack?
I think this church's revenue, and that expense to some extent, is in part more about what we do outside of Sunday service. The fact that we have a school, the fact that we've got a major commitment to food distribution, the idea that we took risk with supporting immigration. There are some sources of income that come to this church because of those programs, and those people don't even come to church. It's because we're doing something as a community. And it takes risks sometimes. And I might say trust. I think St. Michael's has been rather successful among Episcopal churches, if not all churches, in the community because we have done that. So that's a personal opinion. But I think in a way it's borne out with additional revenue that we generate outside of.
So, yeah, so the question is, we've increased our facility use fees. So the facility use fees have been budgeted. We actually decreased our budget. So our budget last year was 8,210. Our budget for 2025 was 7,000. That's kind of based on actuals because facility use fees came in just at 6,550. So I have with Sherry and others on the staff, and the vestry, and I've talked about this. I've been a little bit of a stickler with some of our outside groups. We had a couple of particularly music groups that were not treating our staff very well. They were making a lot of demands on how the space was used and were not being particularly polite about the way they interacted with our staff. And one of those groups in particular, after it happened a couple of times, I said, we're done. You can find a new venue. And so we've taken a little bit of a hit based on that, but I'm not gonna let an outside group, no matter how great of musicians they are, treat our staff badly. So that is, I'm not actually budgeting. We do have another music group that has a lot of relations to the congregation and know the staff well and treat them wonderfully, that is anticipating using the space. So I'm thinking we may actually beat the $7,000, but it won't be by much.
No, that helps me. I didn't realize it was 8, 10, so thanks.
Yeah, so that's most of that revenue is music. The AA groups and the 12-step groups, there's not a set rate. They make a contribution. And that's because, I mean, like every church that I've been a part of, but AA was founded out of an Episcopal church. It's an extension of our mission to hold that hospitality. We do ask them to clean up after themselves, and that we do sometimes have to get in with them and talk about, hey, we need you to clean up after your coffee and things like that. But that tends to be about the only interaction with them. We don't, if they can't give what they've given in past years, we don't tell them to find a different space.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
This is my first budget process with this church.
Yeah.
My first budget rodeo. So how does this work? Is there like a mid-year review to see how things are going, and does the congregation meeting into?
So in the Episcopal Church, the vestry sets the budget. So today at our vestry meeting, we'll vote on the proposed budget. What you have before you is why it says proposed budget. The budget has been proposed by our finance committee to the vestry. And the vestry is the body that votes. The congregation gets to see the budget after the vestry votes on it at the annual meeting. But the congregation doesn't vote on the budget. You elect representatives who vote to the budget. And that feels like nuance, but it's different in different denominations sometimes. We did a mid-year review in October, by September, for the congregation ahead of stewardship season. I really like doing that because before we invite people to give, I think it's good to have a moment of saying, here's where we are. And so if you go on our YouTube channel, you can go back and see these slides are actually updated from those October slides, or September slides. We had July numbers at that point. So that's what you saw at that time, so about mid-year. And then we looked at them. But there's not a vote to happen except when the vestry votes on budget items.
But the finance committee does review the progress each month throughout the year
Yeah.
as we go along.
And reports to the vestry.
And reports to the
And
vestry.
it goes to the vestry, yeah.
Yep. Barbara.
I always say that budget should reflect your priorities and vice versa, that the priorities
Yep.
should speak to your budget. And I was wondering in the future, and not now because I know this is already prepared as a proposal, but in the future I'd like to see an increased investment in youth ministry.
So funny you should say that.
Did you pay her?
No, I didn't. One of the things that, because we're giving you totals, one of the positions that is proposed in this budget is a full-time youth and outreach ministries person. I'm actually in conversations with somebody. I won't give you any more details than that. But as we looked around the church, I didn't find enough clergy that fit with us and fit with, that I could hire 2 clergy right now. But I have encountered, and I think there's some real possibility to bring in a younger layperson. And the way that job description, which is in draft form right now, is written, it's the primary thing to reinvigorate our youth ministry. I do think that is one place where the dollars of a staff person are the most crucial dollars we'll spend. We've got money for youth ministry in the budget that hasn't been spent. And so while it is part of Simone's profile, I'm actually hoping that Simone is part 1 of a 2-part hire for 2 folks to really be reinvigorating our youth ministry. but thanks for the plan.
I didn't think-
Any other questions about where we are with the wider budget?
Would it be fair to say we expect 2025 to have more emphasis on Christian formation?
I think that that's very fair to say.
The second part of that is,
What is
Christian
Christian formation?
formation?
So,
All I see is injection plastic molding.
yeah, it's not that. So Christian formation is the way that we've started talking about Christian education. And the idea behind that is that in a faith community particularly, formation is not a one direction thing. It's not just a priest downloading what they learned in seminary to people, right? Formation is what's happening right now in the next building, where 3 different groups are talking together about a book that they're reading and how it intersects with their spiritual lives and what's going on in the world. Formation is a dialectical process, and it's not necessarily limited to just a classroom behavior. A lot of the best youth ministry that's happening right now is engaging youth in outreach and service. Service learning has become a central way that we talk about how youth are formed. And so when we talk about Christian formation, it's all of that work of education and the kind of the cure of souls, the growth of our faith, the investment in our faith journey. One of the reasons why I think Simone is a really good hire for us is that Simone has been a youth minister, not just for a parish, but for a diocese. And when I talked to Canon Lee, the Canon of the Ordinary, Lee Curtis, here in the Diocese of the Rio Grande, about Simone, he said, you know, the thing that Alamogordo is going to be the most angry with you about taking Simone. That's why Alamogordo. She's currently the rector in Alamogordo. Is that Simone's Sunday school on Sunday? The Christian formation, the adult and Christian formation that happens, is one of the best in the area, and people are going to be really sad that Simone has gone somewhere else because she's just such a good teacher and leader. And so I think Simone's in a good place to work on these ministries. And I think we could honestly use some additional support in them as well.
I have one more quick question. Are we going to have a retreat this year? I don't see it specifically in here, but maybe some.
So it's always been part of the formation budget. The reason we didn't have a retreat this last year was that the retreat was for early September and Mandy left at the end of July. And I didn't have the staff resources to pull that off. My hope is that we do have a retreat this year. I'd like to put a committee together. One of the things that I want to do with Simone as soon as she gets here is put the Christian Formation Committee back together. That had disbanded in the last years of Mandy's time. And I think that committee will get a chance to shape what that looks like going forward. I'd like to open the question about whether Bishop's Ridge is the best place to hold it too, because my experience of Camp Stoney was that it didn't have necessarily the most comfortable accommodations. And so I think it'd be worth opening the question about where we do the retreat in terms of an all-parish retreat. I heard a lot of grumbling, like with the Israelites in the desert.
Produce manna.
One thing we haven't talked about is the school.
Yeah.
And the school, under a new director for the last 2 years now?
Year and a half.
Year and a half, so she's into her second.
The first thing I did was hire Monica.
Right, yeah. So she is rebuilding the staff, and she is rebuilding now the board, and the board will come up with a whole new budget that'll be based on a whole variety of new things, such as the tuition has not increased at the school
in 5 years.
For 5 years. And so they're looking at what the going rate is at other places, and so that will be increasing. We get an awful lot of money from the state for early childhood education, and she and Sherry have been working very closely with people from the state because our numbers were down and there was concern were we going to lose money and so forth, but with the growth that's been going on, the state's happy that our growth is continuing, and so we haven't been losing any of that money. But there's several pots of money that we're getting money from that supports the students coming to the school. And Monica and Sherry are figuring all that out and getting a good handle on that. And the new board will come up with a new budget for next year. And so that's in good hands, but it's still growing.
So
And this board realizes that at the end of the day, Mike's the boss?
So yeah, let me say a word about the school, and then I've got to let you go because I got to go do another worship service. But we will put the year end. Sherry looked at me right at the beginning and was like, "Oh no, I printed the wrong report for the school, so you only have January." The school is I mean, like if we think we've had transition on the church side, whoo. On the school side, it has been significant. There's like maybe 5 families that are the same families, and that's normal in a preschool, right? Because you have kids for maybe 3 years and they move on. But the entire staff, with 2 exceptions of folks who had been here for months before I got here, has turned over. All of the lead teachers and the assistant director and the director. We have gone from 22 students enrolled in August of 2023 to 38 students enrolled. 2 of our classrooms have wait lists.
So we only have 3 openings in the other.
Yeah, and the class that we've got the 3 openings in is the oldest class. We've only got 3 openings there, and one of them may be being filled by Simone's daughter. So, so the school is in a much stronger place than it was a year and a half ago. We have not updated the budget since the other major change that happened at the school is it used to be that we had little grants that helped supplement pre-K for students that needed it. We still have some of that, but the state of New Mexico is more than 2/3 of our budget at the school. The trust fund for early childhood is paying for pre-K for kids across the state, and they have upped the salaries of teachers. I mean, we don't get to vote on that when we participate in pre-K. Our lead teachers are making almost $70,000 a year now, which is a significant increase. The state pays for that in the pre-K rooms, but it's meant that we've had a lot of adjustments to the budget that we're playing catch up to.
But they don't pay for the director.
They do pay for 2/3 of the director.
2/3 of the director.
Yeah, and 2/3 of the assistant director. So that's part of what, it's just been a lot of shift. We have a new board. The new board includes Judy Fifield and Megan Sandoval and Beth Odegaard from the congregation, a couple of other parents, and we're working on potentially changing our bylaws so we can invite somebody from the community with background in early childhood. We may not call them a board anymore. We may call them an advisory committee because legally the vestry is the board of the school. And so we're working on some bylaws changes that the vestry will be looking at. But you need to hear, we just got another email this week, like kind of begging about, can I get my kid in the early pre-K class? We are in such a stronger place with the school. On Christmas, in the build up to Christmas, we had they can't start without me.
Do they know that?
We got 5 minutes. But they had yeah, no, they'll be okay. Jake has got it. But they had a presentation with the kids in the school. The pews were packed with parents and grandparents and older siblings. And there's this moment where like the littlest kid, kids, the Wonder Room, are singing a little song. And it was just like the paparazzi were taking pictures of it. The life over there is so exciting right now. So we've got some catch-up work to do, and it may be that we're essentially investing in the school a little bit in terms of finances, but I can't find a better investment right now than what's going on over there. So we really appreciate the congregation's patience as the new staff makes headway, but man, I think we've got a great staff over at the preschool right now, and I think we're in good stead. All right, will you join me? We need to do 2 rounds of applause. The first is for your finance committee members. Will you say thank you to your finance committee members? The second is to Sherry Bertram, who managed taking it on and the transition this year, a huge amount of work. Thank you all so much.